gatekeepers who will keep Canada, make Canada the freest country on earth, who will bring as much prosperity as possible, who will get shovels in the ground, who will lower your taxes, who will do everything he can to keep our streets as safe as possible. I want to introduce the next Prime Minister, the Honourable Pierre.
Thank you very much to Vancouver Island. Great to be with you. A great friend of Trudeau from Kamloops gave me a call about 3 weeks ago, and he said that, Pierre, do you believe in free speech? I said, yes. He said, how would you like to give one? And that's how I ended up here today giving this speech. And it's great to be with Tracy Gray, Member of Parliament from Kelowna. So many other great conservatives here on the island, a place of common sense, of the common people, united for our common home, our country, Canada. And boy, oh boy, the only problem with common sense is that it's uncommon, isn't it? Unbelievable. I mean, look around you. What's happening to this country of ours? It feels like everything's broken. We have, in a country with the second biggest landmass on planet Earth, more land than we know what to do with. Somehow 9 out of 10 of our young people can't find a place to live. Here we are with the 5th biggest supply of farmland per capita on planet Earth, and we can't afford food. What if Canadians skipping meals because they can't afford the price of groceries? And $1.82 for a liter of gasoline. Unbelievable what a carbon tax will do to your cost of living, isn't it? And this is 8 years of Justin Trudeau. Remember sunny ways? They've turned to cloudy days, haven't they? And meanwhile, his biggest priority is not to protect you and your friends and family from violent criminals, but rather to take away your hunting rifles. As though it's the hunter in Nunavut who's responsible for the drive-by shootings in downtown Toronto, right? Talk about a lack of common sense here on the island. Just this week, a gentleman named Clint Smith had his tools stolen. And so what did he do? Well, he went to get his tools back. Of course, he was attacked, and now he's in the hospital in an induced coma, and all of us are praying for him and his swift recovery. I understand I'm going to be meeting with his family later today. All of you, please spare a thought and a prayer for him and his family as he goes through this difficult time. This is Canada after 8 years of Justin Trudeau, and the Democrats, of course, are 100% behind Trudeau's radical, woke agenda. They've entered into a costly coalition, and now the NDP is not working for British Columbia, they're working for Justin Trudeau in Ottawa. They're failing to recognize that their responsibility is to the people that they represent and their constituencies, to be the voice of British Columbia to Ottawa, not the voice of Ottawa to British Columbia. Well, the good news is that we will put forward a strong Conservative team that will replace the NDP Liberal coalition with a common sense Conservative government that will put you back in charge of your life. Home lower prices by getting rid of the inflationary deficits and costly carbon tax increases. That deficit, $500 billion of deficits, printed money, bidding up the cost of the goods we pay and the goods we buy and the interest we pay. Highest inflation in 40 years, an obvious result of creating all of this cash, spending money we don't have on things that we do not need. A Polyev government's going to bring in a legal dollar-for-dollar cap on spending. Every new dollar of spending will be matched with $1 of savings automatically and by law. They did this in the States in the 1990s wiped out their deficit, paid off $400 billion of debt. Right when this law was lapsed, they went back into deficit and haven't reemerged since, proving politicians need the same limits on their spending that every other creature has to put on their own use of resources. Whether you're, that's right. The birds in the trees, the fish in the seas all have to live with scarcity. They have to maximize the use of limited resources. The only creature in the universe that doesn't have to do that is the politician who just passes the cost on to everybody else. Well, that comes to an end with a dollar-for-dollar law that we will bring in. You've been pinching your pennies long enough. It's time for politicians in Ottawa to start pinching their pennies. Carbon tax. You know, Trudeau and the NDP want to triple the tax on your gas, your heat, and your groceries, making life even more expensive. I'll tell you the story briefly of the little miracles of Manotick. They're tomatoes grown in Manotick, Ontario, but the farmer has to pay carbon tax on the CO2 released into the greenhouse, even though that CO2 goes right into the plant life. Apparently Trudeau missed that day in grade 4 science class. And so the result is it's more expensive to buy a Manotick tomato in Manotick than a Mexican tomato in Manotick. The price signal tells us that we should buy the more polluting tomato that had to be transported by truck and train, burning diesel all the way across North America, instead of buying our own farm produce. Well, Poilievre government is going to lift the carbon tax off of our food. It's going to end these fertilizer mandates. It's going to lift taxes off of our fuel, and we're going to bring home production of our food right back to Canada. We're going to cut all the waste in the woke and broke government in Ottawa. For one thing, we're going to save $1 billion by defunding the CBC. High-priced consultants. You know, we're spending $21 billion on these high-priced consultants. That works out to $1,400 for every family in Canada for consultants to do the job that public servants are supposed to be doing. The bureaucracy has grown by 30%, and still the bureaucrats can't do the work. They have to contract it out to $5,000 a day consultants at companies like McKinsey. No. We're going to be firing the high-priced consultants, bring the work in-house, get the bureaucrats to do the job, save the money for the people. That's what we're doing. By capping spending and cutting waste, we will bring home lower prices for our people and restore the purchasing power of our money. Speaking of purchasing power, we're going to bring home powerful paychecks again. We're going to end the war on work. Right now, we punish work in this country. You're a $60,000 a year worker who's a single mom with 3 kids. You earn an extra buck, you lose 80 cents in taxes and clawbacks. That's $20 of your $25 an hour wage, meaning you're only bringing home $5 of that extra hour you work. $5 an hour. Nobody should be expected to work for that. The Poilievre government is going to bring home powerful paychecks by cutting income taxes, fixing the clawbacks, and making sure that people like that single mom, or like that trucker, or like that barber, or all the hardworking people of the land bring home more of their paycheck. We're going to make work pay in this country again. Our paychecks from abroad. We're giving away our money to foreign powers, right? We're blocking resource development here in this country, which means that more and more foreign dictators get to produce the world's oil and gas and other minerals. You know, we have the 3rd biggest supply of oil on planet Earth, and yet we're importing 130,000 barrels of oil from Saudi Arabia every single day. Meanwhile, we have 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas right beneath our feet, but we can't export a single solitary cubic foot of the stuff because Trudeau blocked the 15 different LNG export plants that were proposed when he took office. Meanwhile, the Americans have built 7 of them. Them and the Qataris are taking over the global market along with foreign dictatorships like Vladimir Putin. So here's the plan, folks. I'm going to repeal the anti-energy law C-69 so we can build Canadian pipelines. Plant, more than double its daily production of oil so that we can fully replace all of the overseas oil we're bringing in, and within 5 years of taking office, we will be 100% free from imports from foreign dictators. We're going to take advantage of our natural advantage in natural gas. We have the shortest shipping distances to Asia and Europe. We have cold weather, which makes it 25% cheaper to liquefy gas here than it does in this U.S. Gulf Coast. It gets cold in Canada, although you don't know anything about cold out here. Stop your complaining. Okay? It gets cold in Ottawa. I'll tell you, it was so cold this winter in Ottawa. Justin Trudeau with a seam with his hands in his own pockets. We're going to use that cold weather to reduce natural gas down to minus 161 degrees, to turn it into a liquid, send it over to Asia to shut down dirty coal-fired plants over there, send it over to Europe to break European dependence on Putin and turn dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people in this country. Electric car, but listen, what good does it do if the battery was made in China burning coal? How does that help the environment? We have the 5th biggest supply of lithium to go in those batteries of any country on Earth, and in 2021 we did not produce a single tablespoon of lithium. Why? Because it takes up to 25 years to get a mine approved in this country. In fact, the one operating mine for lithium in Canada, Trudeau let the Chinese buy it. So they get 100% of all the lithium that comes out of that, send it back there, and they got all the jobs and all the money. We are going to bring home our resource wealth again. We're going to make our stuff here in this country. We're going to bring home control of our fisheries, of our minerals, of our farmland, our water, our rocks, our people. It's time to bring it home in this country. We need to be a nation that no longer kneels before others, but stands on its own 2 feet. And that means we need to bring home safe streets for our people. We've seen the crime that is raging out of control. 32% increase in violent crime ever since Trudeau took office. Double the number of gang killings. Why? It's easy. When you let the most violent repeat offenders out again and again, guess what? They commit more and more crimes. They laugh at our police. They're arrested in the morning and they tell the officer, I'll see you at noon. I'll be back out on bail. And sure enough, the same officer arrests the same thug doing the same crime in the middle of the day that he did in the morning. And they often have to arrest the same criminal 3 times in a day. If you don't believe me, look at the BC Union of Mayors wrote a letter saying that the same 40 criminals had to be arrested 6,000 times in 1 year in Vancouver alone. 6,000 arrests for 40 people. That's 150 arrests per person per year. That's the Liberal NDP catch and release bail system. Only the Conservatives opposed that change to allow same-day release for repeat violent offenders, and that is why I'm proud to announce that a Poilievre government will adopt Frank Caputo's bill to ensure that violent criminals will be arrested, will be kept in Not only that, we're going to put the resources into going after the bad guys, not the good guys, right? This is not a room full of people who are doing drive-by shootings. This is a room full of good, decent people carrying out the thousands of years old tradition of harvesting the land for meat and for sustenance. That has been done before the European peoples even arrived here, by our First Nations people. A way of life that is now under attack by woke big city insiders that don't believe in harvesting nature for human substance. They believe that the government should take away your independent ability to feed yourself. That, Trudeau and the far left, what they hate about rifles, it's not that they're dangerous. If they worried about dangerous, they wouldn't release violent criminals into our streets. They hate about hunting rifles is because they symbolize self-reliance. There's nothing more disgusting to a socialist than the idea that someone would go out into the wilderness and take care of themselves, because then you wouldn't need the government, right? And everything is about, help is the sunny side of control. They want to take away your ability to provide for yourself so that they can provide for you, which means you ultimately have to ask them for everything. Any government that's big enough to give you everything you want will have to be strong enough to take away everything you have. That is what their ideology is really about. It's not about safety. We know, and we have the data, a person with a possession and acquisition license is the least likely person to commit a gun crime. In fact, you have a pal, you're more likely to have a gun, but only half as likely as the average random person on the street to actually commit a gun crime. Because if you're going to go through the trouble of taking the test, having yourself vetted, and having the police look into your background, you're obviously not going to go rob a bank. Bank robbers don't think about getting licenses for guns, do they? So Trudeau's putting all the resources into going after the good guys and none into going after the bad guys. It's going to cost $5 billion to go out and repossess and take away all these guns. Here's my plan. A Poilievre government is going to repeal this gun grab and instead put the money into going after the real criminals. Billions of dollars saved, and we'll bolster our borders, which are the source of 82% of all the guns used in crime illegally transported into the country. 82% of Toronto's gun crime is committed by American illegal weapons, not by Canadian licensed firearms. So we're going to go after the bad guys. We're going to bring home some common sense and bring home safe streets to our country. And speaking of bringing it home, we're going to bring home our freedom again, aren't we? Our freedom in this country. What does that mean? When I say bring home freedom, it feels like we've been giving our freedom away to a lot of foreign interests, haven't we? Now, you've been following what's going on with the political interference by Beijing's communist dictatorship. Here's what we know. These are the facts. These are not allegations. Beijing gave $200,000 to the Trudeau Foundation. They then started interfering in our elections, funding with quote, clandestine transfers of funds to political parties as early as the 2019 election. They interfered in the 2021 election to help Justin Trudeau's Liberals get re-elected. They had done analysis to confirm that Trudeau would be better for them than would a conservative government. Why is it that Beijing believes that Justin Trudeau is so good for Beijing? It's because he's working hard for Canadians? I don't think so. Why is it they've gone to all these lengths to keep him in power? Is it because he, in his own words, admires the basic Chinese communist dictatorship? Or that he says Fidel Castro was a great leader? Is it because he wants to bring in censorship laws that the experts on the internet all say only exist in places like North Korea, Cuba, and of course communist China? Maybe it's because they understand that he does not stand up for freedom in our country, just like they do not stand up for freedom as the government of communist China. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to stand up to bring home control of our democracy by bringing in a foreign influence registry. You know, you have to register if you want to be a lobbyist for the local food bank, but you don't have to register if you want to be a secret lobbyist for a communist dictatorship. Enough is enough. Let's bring home some common sense and let's expose those who are working on behalf of foreign dictatorships. Control of our own agenda in this country. We're going to set our own terms on our own land. We're going to remember that members of parliament, ministers, work for the people in their communities. They do not work for Beijing, and they do not work for Davos, and that is why I am banning every single member of my caucus and my ministry and my future government from any involvement whatsoever in the World Economic Forum. Free speech. Having Justin Trudeau and his woke bureaucracy at the CRTC control what you see and say on the internet is not free speech. It is manipulation. They want to manipulate the algorithms of the internet to determine what appears on your YouTube or your Facebook feed so that they can push forward woke messages that are approved by the liberal establishment in Ottawa. We have, in my view, 37 million regulators of the internet in Canada. They're called citizens of Canada. And they should decide through their click, not through a clique, what they see on the internet. And that is why a Polyev government will recognize Section 2B of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the freedom of expression. To be or not to be? That is the question. Here's my answer. Polyev government will support free speech by repealing C11, the Internet Censorship Law. We're not going to give our central bank control of your bank account either. We do not want the government to control your money. They're talking about the central bank digital currency. Does anybody trust the government to deposit their money in their accounts? The budget, it turns out, doesn't balance itself, does it? And nor do we want to trust the government to control our bank deposits, and that's why I will be banning the Bank of Canada from creating a central bank digital currency. And we will never allow the government to force you to have a digital ID either. You should have the ability to protect your own privacy and your own information. Here's the plan for a Polyev government to bring it home. Bring home lower prices. Bring home powerful paychecks. Bring home our industries, our jobs, and our paychecks. Bring home safe streets and bring home freedom to this country. That is what we're fighting for. That is what these members of Parliament here are working to champion on your behalf. We believe that you should be the master of your own destiny. And that really is the decision. Do we concentrate the power in the hands of a small group of self-selected aristocrats, or do we, as was envisioned by our entire system of government, restore the power to the hands of the common people? You know, their whole ideology is based on the assumption that there's a group, a very small group, that are made of better clay. They're just smarter and more virtuous. They have to protect the unwashed masses from themselves. They sit around and they theorize on what we should all be doing and thinking and how our money should be spent. You notice that always, whatever the problem is, the answer is always the same. More money and power for them. You know, the environment. Oh, they need to take your money through a carbon tax and spend it for you. The disinformation online. Oh, they need to control what you see on the internet. Racism. Oh, they claim that they need to censor what you say, even while they have at the head of their government a guy who spent half his life as a practicing racist. Or you name the problem. Okay, firearms. Instead of going after criminals, they want to control your ability to use your lawful rifle. In every instance, whenever they find a problem, the same solution is for them to have more power and you to have less freedom. It is based on the assumption that they are better than everybody else. They have some sort of special wisdom. You know who didn't agree with that? The great Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, a man who had written 58 volumes of Nobel Prize-winning literature, who had rough-shouldered with all the kings and queens and emperors of the world his entire life, but understood that the real wisdom rested with the common man and woman. That's why he became a bricklayer in his spare time. Not a very good one, because he recognized that it was actually really tough to lay bricks. The work that the average laborer did in the countryside of the Midlands or in the inner city of London, this work was done by good people, the common people. One of my favorite stories is in the middle of the Second World War, he went out into the streets of London that had just been leveled by the Nazi warplanes. He loved to go and talk with the people and hear their stories. And he happened upon a little old lady who had been buried under rubble as the buildings had come crashing down. And miraculously, she was not badly harmed, but they helped scrape away the rubble and lift off the rocks. And she looked him in the eyes and she said, "Thank you." And as she was helped away, he stood in silence, and his staff noticed that there were tears pouring down his eyes. He said, "There goes greatness." He knew that wars are not won by kings and queens or even generals, but by the common people. Those courageous privates who came running out of the trenches into harm's way. Those defiant Londoners who stood on their roofs and threw rocks at the Nazi warplanes as they went by. Those common people who disavowed the elites that wanted to give in to Hitler and back down and give up on the war. The common people who said little and did much and sacrificed the most. Often, these are called ordinary people. but they are not ordinary. They are extraordinary. The farmer who must balance the weather, the soil chemistry, the commodity prices to bring food from his fork, from his field to your fork, is not ordinary. He is extraordinary. The single mother who balances 15 tough customers, is on her feet all day long, comes home to help her son with math, and balances the budget on a minimum wage salary. She is not ordinary. She is extraordinary. The electrician who brings lightning through a copper wire to light up our homes, he is not ordinary. He is extraordinary. These are the great people of our land. These are the people we serve. We have to remember, as members of Parliament, we are not masters. We are servants. Servants of the common people. The common sense of the common people, united for our common home, Canada, your home, my home, our home. Let's bring it home. In the words of the great Canadian Prime Minister, John Diefenbaker, I am a Canadian, a free Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I think wrong, free to worship God in my own way, free to choose those who shall govern my country. This heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and for all of mankind. Thank you very much. God bless.